Scott Cawthon seems like a pretty chill guy. Between his frequent interactions with and support for the community, his charitable contributions, and the often controversial but well-intentioned Fazbear Fanverse initiative, he's been really cool in his management of what is now a massive franchise. There have been bad actors who've illegally redistributed Scott's games, and there have been situations where the man had no choice but to take something down. In general though, he's been very supportive of FNAF derivative works. This includes both fan games like the Candies and Flumpties series, as well as FNAF-inspired original IP like the Walton Files. However, one FNAF-inspired game would push Scott's leniency too far, leaving him with no choice but to defend the franchise using the fury of 1,000 ancient evils. This is the tale of an original game that soared to the top of the charts, only for Scott and his lawyers to take it down at the height of its popularity. In November of 2015, about a year and a half after the world was taken by storm by the first Five Nights at Freddy's game, the Steam greenlight trailer for Case Animatronics appeared. Having clearly taken inspiration from FNAF, the game presented itself as a 3D, free-roaming take on the genre. Investigate a spooky police station and avoid animatronic foes that you can monitor in real time using security cameras. It was actually a pretty novel idea, considering that the official FNAF games had, up until this point, always been 2D pre-rendered projects, and people were excited to see a game like this realized in full 3D. Unfortunately, Case Animatronics would draw the attention of more than just the fandom. They brought the wrathful eye of Scott Cawthon upon them. The game had received a ton of interest from people, and it had performed extremely well on greenlight. As you can imagine, many of us were quite surprised when less than a week after Case's debut, Scott Cawthon and his lawyers took the game down. According to Case developers Pink App, they received 2 emails that fateful day. The first was a notice from Steam about the removal of the game from greenlight, and the other was a letter from Scott Cawthon's attorney Chris Ellis Jr. saying that the game violated Five Nights at Freddy's copyright. That same evening, Case Animatronics was removed from Steam greenlight. This took some by surprise. Sure, Case was certainly very derivative of FNAF, any game with spooky animals is going to be compared to it, but still, it didn't use FNAF characters or settings or trademarks or anything. Looking at the game now, there's nothing in there that's explicitly Five Nights at Freddy's, just generic stuff. Some suggested that Scott had somehow obtained claims to the word animatronic, and some even speculated that Scott somehow owned the very idea of spooky robots in a video game. The Case developers were obviously heartbroken by the events that transpired. They had gone from having one of the hottest games on Steam greenlight to being threatened by Scott Cawthon's lawyers. Our energy and enthusiasm was nearly drained. With the development of Case Animatronics, we focused on making a stealth horror game in 3D with the ability to walk around, explore, and listen to the world around you, and that certainly is not a point-and-click release like Five Nights at Freddy's. They were frustrated. They thought that Scott had taken down their game wrongfully. So what was the problem exactly? Upon Case Animatronics' debut, some noticed that one of the animatronics in particular was incredibly similar looking to Freddy Fazbear, especially in some of these shots. Are some aspects pretty different? Yes, absolutely. Freddy isn't a panda. Regardless, with so much of the game taking place in the dark, the overall silhouette and design is pretty reminiscent of the titular character in Scott's own franchise. It's literally his trademark. Freddy's face appears everywhere, and it's used to denote that something is an official Five Nights at Freddy's product. Many began to speculate that Scott and his lawyers had taken specific exception to the bear animatronic in Case. They felt that it was too similar to Freddy and that it could conceivably confuse people into believing that it was an official Five Nights at Freddy's product. On top of this, there were other elements in the trailer that might have been pushing it, but I really think that Freddy's design was the key here. We wouldn't hear anything for over a year until suddenly, in April of 2016, Case Animatronics returned to Steam. There were some visual changes, and noticeably, the bear character that had caused so much controversy was completely absent. Naturally, the game was shared on the Five Nights at Freddy's subreddit, and some began to speculate as to what had happened. Scott had issued a DMCA takedown against the game the prior year, and yet here it was again. Was this all on the up and up? Were they just ignoring Scott's wishes? Are you gonna hit the subscribe button? Oh wait, they changed the subscribe button's design? Seriously? Where even is the button anymore? What is this? Thankfully, Scott himself arrived in the comments section to clarify. Just to provide some backstory, when this game was first released, though I think he meant to say announced, it featured a main character and icon that looked a lot like Freddy Fazbear, as well as a lot of other similarities. They've changed a lot about their game since then. As another user mentioned, I don't have any claim to the word animatronic. From this, we can surmise most of what happened. The initial greenlight trailer featured a character that was way too similar to Freddy Fazbear. Scott and his lawyers showed up and were like, yo, cut that out, you can't be doing that. The Case developers were like, okay, fine, we'll change the stuff that you think is too FNAF-like. Once those changes were implemented, Scott had no problem with the resulting game. As he said himself, he has no claim over the very idea of spooky robots or animatronics or whatever. The problem was that the bear looked too much like Freddy, that was it. Now that this bear was removed, Case Animatronics would go on to be finished, get a full full release and even a sequel with multiplayer. It's still available on Steam for $10 and you can play it, although I really wouldn't recommend it. The game it's bad. It's really bad. Immediately we're greeted to some goofy voice acting and a basic premise of avoid spooky robots in a spooky police station. There are some interesting gameplay mechanics, such as being able to observe the security cameras while walking around and hiding from the animatronics, but these ideas are never actually utilized in any meaningfully interesting way. The actual gameplay just amounts to bad stealth mechanics, lots of brute forcing, and throwing yourself at a checkpoint over and over again until the game's abysmal AI finally decides to let you win. It's that kind of game. Case gives you absolutely no direction whatsoever. At one point, I needed to find a key card to progress. There was nothing indicating that I needed a key card, so I was just wandering around aimlessly, unsure as to what I was even looking for. Eventually, I found the key card, but upon dying, I went to retrieve it again and found that it spawns in random locations every attempt. This is the laziest game design. It expects you to wander around aimlessly, avoiding the brutally punishing enemies and praying that you happen to come across and also notice the item that you need to progress. It's like they built a map, built some basic pathing AI for the enemy animatronics, and then realized, oh crap, we don't have a game. Let's spawn a bunch of bullshit around the police station in random locations and make the player find them and figure out what to do. I can honestly say that Security Breach is a better game than this. Case Animatronics gameplay was bad, but nothing could have prepared me for what I would find next. This is seriously the most insane thing I've ever seen in a FNAF derivative game ever. Littered across the walls of the police station that the game takes place in are wanted posters depicting criminals with outstanding warrants. This didn't seem unusual for a police station, but my jaw hit the floor when I looked closer at these wanted posters. Wanted, treason and incitement against Jews. Now would probably be a good time to let everyone know that while I am not religious, I was raised in a secular Jewish family and I had a bar mitzvah and stuff, so I'm like totally comfortable talking about this. Anyway, wanted for treason and incitement against Jews. SD Chandler, JVP organizer. Wow. I am speechless. I cannot believe that this is included in a Five Nights at Freddy's inspired animatronic game. I'm going to warn you that the following is bizarre. The above named suspect is wanted in connection with numerous acts of fermenting hatred and anger against the Jewish people and the Jewish state of Israel. As the lead Los Angeles area organizer for the notorious anti-Jewish and anti-Israel organization known as the Jewish Voice for Peace. What the f? In this public capacity, the subject proudly uses her own presumed Jewishness as a weapon against the Jewish people and groups to assist in Israel's destruction, gender hatred, and incite further violence. I have no words. What even is this? Is this like Zionist propaganda or something? In a FNAF fan game? Okay, this is even weirder than I thought. SD Chandler is a real person. She's actually an advocate for the Jewish Voice for Peace, which is a left-wing Jewish advocacy group in the United States. So this really is propaganda here. This is calling for the arrest of like an actual activist. And obviously I'm not going to get into politics. I don't know anything about politics and the Israel-Palestine conflict or whatever, but this is not the kind of thing to joke about in a game. I was dumbfounded when I saw this just because I thought it was some random thing that they made up or something, but the fact that it's a real person makes this whole thing a lot more disturbing, to be honest. These assets even get reused elsewhere too. Someone suggested to me that perhaps this was an asset store purchase, but I just don't buy that. If someone uploaded something like this to the Unity or Unreal Asset Store, it would surely be reported and taken down for being inappropriate very quickly. This whole narrative here about these self-loathing Jews is so bizarre and so specific, I have to assume that it was for some reason included deliberately. It's insane. It's just very strange. In light of this, I think we can understand why Scott was concerned about this game debuting with a character so similar to Freddy, and why he and his lawyers were so adamant that nothing in the game be too similar to Five Nights at Freddy's. We are hardcore fans, and it's easy for us to tell what's real and what's not, but that's not true for everyone. Younger kids who are just getting into the series might not realize. Parents who know nothing about video games or FNAF would absolutely look at something like Case Animatronics and confuse it for Five Nights at Freddy's. If the former includes this weird Zionist propaganda in the game, that could absolutely color that parent's opinion on the series. They might say, hey, I'm not letting my kid play FNAF if it's full of bizarre political commentary, and now Scott loses a fan and the kid loses out on the opportunity to play a series that they might have loved. Beyond reputational damage, if Scott failed to act in situations like this, it might have emboldened other developers to push things even further, and some of them might not have the fan base's best interest in mind. We've already seen stuff like this. I recently covered Escape FNAF-anons, otherwise known known as FNAF-inspired, a Unity Store asset flip released on the Xbox Store that utilizes stolen security breach assets in its marketing. I know that I've poked fun at games like this and Lazada Pelotti's FNAF 4 entry, and yeah, these games may seem harmless, but they're really not good. When a kid asks their naive parent for a FNAF game and they type FNAF into the Xbox Store, they might see Escape FNAF-Anons. Their kid might see Glamrock Freddy and say, yes, that's it. The next thing you know, some scammer just got a sale off a naive parent, and a kid is inevitably going to be disappointed with some crappy game, never realizing that it wasn't actually an official FNAF game. That can damage a brand, and it's why it's so important for Scott to defend his intellectual property. Most people aren't familiar with FNAF, and some of them might see this stuff, believe that it's official, and get a false impression of what the brand and the franchise's values truly are. Whatever you do though, don't put bizarre Zionist propaganda into your game. That's just a really bad idea, and it's really inappropriate. Anyway, thanks for watching.